You're about to see 19-year-old Hans Niemann take down the former World Championship challenger Boris Gelfand in just 20 moves. What on earth happened? Well, we're about to find out. This is the Julius Baer Generational Cup. It's the knockout stages played a few months ago. Let's check it out. So d4 played by Boris. Knight f6 from Hans, c4, and after e6, preparing bishop b4 if knight c3 potentially, the Nimzo-Indian, where we see knight f3, avoiding that, and so Hans goes back into a queen's gambit declined. Now we see g3, so the Catalan opening, and now bishop e7 is the main move in this position, but Hans goes bishop b4 check, the white bishop blocks, and now he drops back. So why would he deliberately lose a tempo with that bishop? Well, the idea is that white has to now lose a tempo with this one to develop it to a proper square. So you very often see it coming to f4 later on. And now you've stopped it from ever coming to b2, as white might want to do in some variations. So bishop g2 played, both players castle. Hans now develops his knight. We see queen c2, pawn c6 bolsters the centre, and it also sets up ideas of taking and then pushing on with b5. But knight c3 from Boris, so he allows all of this plan. Hans takes on c4, but here's his idea. He now hops the knight into e4, immediately opens up the attack of the queen. We see the knight capturing here though, queen recaptures, this knight hops back, the queen goes, and now after the pawn is defended with b5, here we see b3 immediately undermining that structure, and it's a gambit, it's a pawn sacrifice, but it's not accepted, even though that's the computer's favourite move. Now, I've played these positions a lot myself on the white side in various different openings, and the idea is that you get a lot of pressure despite being a pawn down. So after bishop b7, this is a sample line. You kick the queen, and then you can do different moves here. You can start with e4, setting up the big centre. Rook f c1 often comes, pressuring this pawn. b4 is very thematic to stop c5 ever coming, and you just squeeze black. They've got no pawn breaks. White's having a lot of fun despite being a pawn down. So Hans decides not to accept the gambit. Instead, he develops his bishop, but now white can take here. But this is Hans's idea. Pawn c5, so a very tactical way to just open up this bishop on b7. Now you don't want to capture this one, because then black captures this one and is doing quite well, no development issues, and both of these pawns will be dropping off for both players at some point. So instead we see takes on b5, best move played. Now takes on d4 and a4 from Gelfand, supporting that queenside pawn majority, and in endgames this could be good if ever they can get going. But meantime, Hans wants to drum up an initiative, so he starts with bishop e4, and now this is a bit imprecise from Gelfand. The best move is queen b3, because it stops queen d5, you can chop that one off with a decent position, you know there's pressure on this pawn of course, it's about to drop. But what we see instead is queen b2, and although this pressures the pawn, it allows the queen to immediately come to d5. This is what Gelfand missed, because now if you take with the queen here, then we take on f3, removing the defender of the queen, and you can't capture here, or the bishop recaptures, you're a minor piece down. And what if you instead try and take with the knight? Well, again, no good. Now, of course, you're dropping on g2. So if you can't win the pawn, well, you've let black centralise, not good for white. So instead, Gelfand brings the rook to the d file, further pressures the pawn, but again not the best. He should have challenged this open file, because after rook a to c8, there's now problems with the invasion on c2, and again Gelfand goes wrong. So his best move is bishop to a5, not bishop to f4, which we see in the game. Now I'll show you why. You can't immediately go rook c2, because then the queen can take on d4. This is the whole idea of moving the bishop out of the way to one of these squares. So invading with the rook, no good. But the reason the bishop should have gone this way is because on f4 you run into pawn to e5. And now what is the white bishop doing? And Gelfand makes the fatal blunder here. So what he should do is now capture that pawn. It's the lesser of two evils. Now there's a threat for white to take that d pawn. So there's no time to now invade with the rook. But what happens if you take the knight, eliminating the defender of this bishop? Well, then white would have to carry on chopping here. This is one sample line, and after bishop takes on e7, you can nudge back, threaten mate on g2, pawn f3 blocks, the rook escapes, and this bishop retreats. Now it's a long line, but it's fairly forcing, and here we find white a pawn up, but black has good drawing chances opposite coloured bishops. However, in the game, coming back here, we didn't see Gelfand take on e5, instead he went bishop to g5, and look at the eval bar just plummet. This is completely lost because of rook to c2, and here Gelfand resigned. Where is his queen going? It can't step to these squares, they're all controlled by black pieces. So is this one by the rook, so is this one. So queen b1 is your only square, but then the rook takes here, unleashing the discovery of the bishop. Still the queen barely has a square. If it comes here, you lose the knight because it's now attacked by the queen and bishop at the same time. The pawn was removed, and if instead you go rook d3, best move in the position to hold on to this knight as well as stop the attack, well then black can just play very simply. You can take the exchange and be much better. You can even bring this rook prepared to invade with a second, and then it's carnage for the whole white position. So just a horrible crush for Gelfand there. And if you want to see Hans Niemann doing something similar to Levon Aronian, then check out this video next. Thanks very much for watching and see you soon.